Mexico Profundo, Reclaiming a Civilization by Guillermo Bonfil Batalla. Translated by Philip A. Davis. Preface. It is always tempting to make changes in the text when the decision is made to bring out a second edition. This time I resisted the temptation, not because I think this book is perfect, lacking nothing and with nothing that could be eliminated. I realized from the beginning that it should be an open text, full of questions, lacunae, and preliminary ideas sketched many times that would require better documentation and broader development. Nevertheless, I think that in order to overcome those limitations, it would be necessary to write a different book. As it is, I think that this version of Mexico Profundo fulfills the major intention for which it was written. Perhaps it would lose its value for intellectual and political stimulus if I now try to fill out arguments and amplify options with my own opinions. It might close the spectrum of alternatives that I have tried to contribute in rethinking our history, the present, and the future we should try to build. It has also been said many times that a book leads its own life and takes its own path. Even the author, after placing the final period, has no right to interfere by modifying it. Thus, I decided to leave it as is. I take the opportunity of adding this brief preface to mention recent events and to try to see them from the general perspective of this book. In the little more than a year since the first edition was published, the country has lived through unusual moments, particularly related to the elections of July 6, 1988. The country changed and Mexico is different are phrases that became commonplace in the months that followed. Broad sectors of society were surprised and excited. Some were enthusiastic, others fearful, but all realized that it was necessary to revise the visions and convictions which the image of the country was based. What happened on July 6 demonstrated, in effect, a different Mexico, at least from the viewpoint of those who do not see beyond the limits of the imaginary Mexico. The question remains, what really were the motivations capable of mobilizing hundreds of thousands of Mexicans from the most varied living conditions to simultaneously express their protest and their renewed hopes in a heretofore unthinkable opposition? Let us ask it in this fashion. To what degree, in fact, did the Mexico Profundo awaken? What happened in the hamlets, the villages, the barrios, which have remained at the margin of imaginary political activity, an exercise imposed by that other unreal dominant Mexico, but that has no roots or flesh and blood? From what I can see, little notice has been taken of something that seems basic to me. The Cardenas program, beyond its lack of precision and its poorly drawn and in many ways contradictory outline, was perceived by many as hope for a step backward. Perhaps it was not clear how far back, but in any case, back to a previous place. It was an invitation to begin again, to retrace the steps that have already been traveled. It was a reactionary program, some might say. But it was not really reactionary if you look at things from the other side, from the point of view of those who have been attacked, who have nothing but who are nevertheless denied. From this other point of view, going back is necessary, indispensable in order to advance along the true path, one that leads somewhere besides disaster. I would interpret what happened in the 1988 elections following the basic ideas I advance in this book as the political expression, at least that expression manifested in the electoral exercise, of which large sectors live and feel. It was a reaction to the complete failure of the development model that the imaginary Mexico has tried to impose. The turn backward would signify the recovery of a true, deeply rooted nationalism. It was no coincidence that people, including youth, sang the national anthem with moving conviction, beyond the obligatory requirements of empty ritual. The other side of the coin is that the vote in important indigenous areas confirmed the tradition of absolute dominance of the PRI, or Partido Revolucionario Institucional. Are the Indians the pillars of the system, content with the benefits they receive? I agree with the interpretation offered by Arturo Warman that the Indians voted with short-term results in mind. their considerations have nothing to do with political programs that plant alternative models of society for the future. Voting in these communities is more of a resource for the here and now, exercise with the hope of getting a road finished, constructing a school, obtaining potable water, making progress in acquiring land titles, and other minor support in resolving the everyday ancestral problems that overwhelm all else in life. Everything else is a matter of, quote, the others, end quote, the superimposed world forged by the imaginary Mexico. The political parties will have to dig deep to reach the level where the motivations capable of mobilizing the Mexico Profundo exist. Some progress was made in 1988, but it would be a myopic error to suppose that since then the whole country, not just the part with an audible voice and a visible face, is really different. I do not mean to deny the importance of recent social and political events. I do mean to put them into relative perspective, to complement a vision that is centralist, urban, and somewhat elitist, and according to which what occurs around me is also occurring elsewhere. As in the Mexican Revolution, in the elections of 1988, very diverse motivations were involved, producing convergence and joint action that are not necessarily compatible in the short run. Nevertheless, the events were important. What I will call a conscience of inconsistency was born in large sectors. That is to say, deeply rooted convictions that seem unshakable were questioned. There is an intellectual opening that seems to allow revising the explanations of the country's nature, completing our amputated version of its reality, and rethinking a possible future. Fortunately, dogmatism is at a low point. There is an intellectual space favorable to pluralism. Will we be capable of taking advantage of this moment by taking firm steps towards putting our country back on its feet instead of, as has been the case, on its head? These changes, although largely confined to the imaginary Mexico, would still require putting into practice some of the ideas that are simply noted in the third part of this book. Most certainly, it would be necessary to add others not even mentioned. Various readers and some reviewers have indicated the shortcomings of the last two chapters. I readily admit them. I intend to work more on the topic, although with the clear realization that reflection on our future is a matter for all. Individual contributions, although necessary, are simply that. The debate should be opened, giving it the space and amplitude it deserves. It is not just a matter of debating my ideas. I say frankly in the text that in many cases these are the others' ideas, which I have used without any pangs of conscience to construct a broader argument. Such ideas exist only because of our effort to understand reality. It is that reality and its problems that are important to analyze and discuss. There is a challenge to the imagination, which we can confront only by learning with an authentic recognition of our reality. And we will learn after unmasking our prejudices, after liberating our colonial thinking, after deciding that it is we ourselves who must understand who we are, that the central protagonist of our history and the indispensable component of our future is the Mexico Profundo. Guillermo Bonfil Batalla, Mexico City, April 1989.